Sermon of the Week, Refresh, based on the Book of Psalms. "What's that, boy?" he called to his pal as he trudged along the dusty trail. His friend did not answer, but did stare back his way. He then turned his face toward the woods again. "You see something?" He looked toward the woods where his dog was pointing, but saw nothing. "Must have been a rabbit," he surmised. "Come on, Rex, let's get moving." "By my calculations, we've got 28 miles to go today." He urged Rex to follow him as he walked forward. 28 miles left, and we will have completed the whole Appalachian Trail." He held out a dog bone, then threw it forward 100 feet or so on the trail. Rex was always hungry, especially the last week or so. He perked up, then raced after the dog bone. When he had eaten it, he raced back to Dave, hoping for more treats. "Sorry, boy, I've only got a few left. I'll give you one in a few miles, if you're good, that is." The trail now began a steady rise, with switchback after switchback. Dave's feet began to ache again as he slowed due to the ascent. His breathing rate did not increase, but on the next clearing he decided to sit for a bit, take on some water and some food. He sat on a big rock, reached in his backpack, and pulled out a plastic pack of dried apricots. There was only a handful left, and he scarfed them down. He then leaned back on a rock, closed his eyes for a minute, but jumped as his head lurched forward. He shook his head, rubbed his eyes, and realized he better not close them again. He looked around for Rex, but he didn't see him. He called to him, but there was no response. Finally, he saw Rex's tail. The rest of him edged into the woods to his left. "Rex, what is it, boy? A rabbit?" Rex just kept staring into the woods. His tail was not wagging. He walked over to him and stared into the woods, but could see nothing. "We gotta go, boy. You're probably as delirious as me." Just then he noticed a rustle in the woods to his right. Rex did not notice anything. "Must be the wind," he said aloud. He noticed it must be about 10 miles an hour out of the south. He now noticed all the leaves were moving back and forth. He urged Rex forward, and they marched up the rising trail. The sun was already high in the sky, and he loosened his shirt buttons as the sweat began to form on his forehead. The two marched on up the trail, and after another mile were in another clearing. Rex had run on ahead of him, as was his wont, and as Dave entered the clearing, he called to him. "Rex, where are you? Rex, boy, where are you?" There was no response, and no noise or movement anywhere. Even the wind seemed to have died down. He put his hands on his hips and looked all around several times. Still, there was no response from Rex. He went to the edge of the clearing where the trail continued and called again, but again nothing. He dropped the toothpick he had been chewing on, and it fell to the rocky ground at his feet. Then he noticed it. There was a small spot of blood on the ground. The United States is an interesting country. The world rotates around from east to west, but the United States ridges all seem to emanate north to south, or south to north, depending on your point of view. To that end, man, ever the explorer and wanderer, selected 3 of the country's most prominent ridges to wander on, or walk, or hike, or whatever. The first was the Appalachian Trail. This extends up and down the country's eastern mountain ridges from Mount Cadhadin in Maine to Springer Mountain, Georgia, some 2,200 miles. The Pacific Crest Trail follows the western United States mountains from Manning Park, British Columbia, to Campo, California, some 2,659 miles. Not to be outdone, the Midwest also came up with its own trail, the Continental Divide Trail, which extends some 3,100 miles from Glacier National Park to Columbus, New Mexico. All 3 of these trails are difficult treks and take several months to navigate. If you hike all 3, you are considered to have won the Triple Crown of hiking. The first of these trails, the Appalachian Trail, became an idea in 1921, and the trail was completed in 1937. Most hikers take from 5 to 7 months to complete the hike, but the record is now 46 days or a month and a half. If you hike the trail both ways, south to north and north to south, you have completed a yo-yo. Spring is the recommended time to begin, and food and shoes are the main issues. Most who plan such a hike will mail themselves boxes of provisions on various points on the trail near towns. The trail passes through 14 states. It is estimated that 1 in 4 who attempt the hike will actually complete it. Some 3,000 people complete the hike every year, but some 2 million hike a part of it each season. It is not only a test of your physical well-being, but your endurance and your ability to remain focused when difficulties arise. They more than likely will as you hike 2,000 miles over mountains and wilderness. Your ability to adjust, refresh, and continue will be tested. Success is always patiently waiting for you at the end of the trail. Back to our hero, Dave. On seeing the spot of blood, Dave froze. He looked around and then called out again for Rex. Again, there was no response. Maybe it's from a rabbit. Maybe Rex caught the little critter. I know he's hungry all the time, he said aloud. Not believing his own theory, he called out even louder, Rex, buddy, Rex. Again, he heard nothing and saw nothing. He decided to move up the trail a ways and see if he couldn't find Rex. As he looked down again, he saw another spot of blood and then another leading up the trail. But when the trail turned from rock back into dirt, he saw no more blood. He didn't know what to do, but forged on up the trail, hoping to find Rex chewing on some critter. He trekked up the rising trail for another mile or so and then saw a clearing ahead. Spirits picked up, and he called again, Rex, Rex boy, you up there? He heard nothing, but hurried up into the clearing, which was actually a rocky mountain top area. His eyes scanned the large area from left to right, and then he froze. He stared in amazement at an area to his right near the woods line. There on the rocks was Rex, his dog, his neck being held by a large mountain lion. Rex did not seem to be struggling, but his tongue was panting, so Dave knew he was still alive. The lion held Rex in his teeth and stared at his new threat, Dave. Dave was an inexperienced hiker, and he had once attempted the Pacific Crest Trail, but a severe ankle sprain ended that hike. He did see a mountain lion from a distance on that hike and had heard and read of many such encounters with mountain lions and bears. But there were not supposed to be mountain lions in the east. However, this was no illusion. This was an honest-to-goodness mountain lion who was about to eat his dog and then likely attack its master. Rex was a beautiful Alsatian, but no match for the giant cat. Dave knew what the drill was. If threatened by a mountain lion, you were to stay still, then slowly back away. But Dave's mind perceived multiple issues here. He could do the drill, but would most certainly lose his best friend and maybe then his own life. They were miles from civilization, and he hadn't seen any other hiker for several miles. He could charge the lion and hope to scare it off. He could run for help, though there would likely be none, and the big cat would most surely run him down. He could yell, but that would only stir the cat's anger. Then the worst scenario crossed his mind. Maybe there was more than one cat. Dave churned up all this information in his mind in what seemed to be an eternity. He finally remembered to pray. But this, too, seemed to do no good. The cat stared at him, the panting dog in its mouth, for at least another eternity. But as time marched on, Dave's attitude began to change. His better judgment seemed to ease away. What took its place was slowly welling anger. It built gradually, but it kept building. Finally, it boiled over. "You're not going to take my dog, Mr. Lion," he yelled, "and you're not going to take me." The lion was not startled, but did begin a low but steady growl. Dave took some time to rethink things, but remained resolute. The lion kept growling as he held Rex firmly. Then Dave noticed something. About halfway between him and the lion, there was a little pile of rocks, stacked one upon another. It was likely a little monument some children had piled one day, and the wind had not yet toppled over. Dave surmised there was probably 100 feet between him and the lion. He did not see any other stones closer, but thought if he could get to those rocks, maybe, just maybe, he could throw them at Mr. Lion and injure him, or at least scare him away. Thought of running toward the lion, but was sure that the lion would then rush him. So he decided he would ease forward and see if he could get to that little rock pile. He began to slowly step toward the rock pile, and the lion. To his relief, the pitch of the lion's growl became higher, but the cat stood its ground. Dave kept inching forward, fully expecting disaster to strike, but it didn't. It took a third eternity to reach that rock pile, but finally he did. He slowly lowered his hand and grabbed a few rocks. He stood back up and sized up the distance between him and the lion. What the lion didn't know, and he had for the moment forgot, was that David had done some semi-pro pitching and even spent one season as a relief pitcher for the Rome Braves, the Atlanta Braves Class A minor league baseball team. "It's about 60 feet, Dave said aloud. He wound up and threw a small, round, hard rock as hard as he could. It whizzed by the big cat's nose, but did not hit him. The cat gave as big scream as he could with the dog in its mouth, but did not budge. Dave picked up another stone of similar size, wound up, and fired again. This one hit Rex on the shoulder, and now Rex yelped, but was helpless to move. The cat screamed again, but was not yet about to let his prey loose. "That's strike two, Mr. Cat," Dave said loudly. But his fear was now returning in earnest. He picked up the roundest, smoothest stone remaining, wound up, and let it fly. The baseball struck home. It caught the big cat right between the eyes, and to his amazement, it dropped to the ground, dead. "Strike three, you're out of there, pal," Dave yelled. "I'll bet that one read 100 miles an hour on the radar gun, Rexy," he said as his dog came running seemingly unharmed. After a brief reunion, Dave turned to look back at his conquest, but the lion was gone. As he and his bedraggled Rex headed down the path, Dave saw a sign indicating his location. It read Blood Mountain, Georgia. What's been your experience when you're under the gun, when you're under duress, when there seems to be no option, when there is no way out? We've all been there, and we will all be there again, some more than others. What do? Do you have a plan for such events? Most institutions have an emergency plan. Buildings have a plan for emergency evacuations when there is a fire or some other tragedy. Cities, even states, have plans for hurricanes, tornadoes, and other calamities. Schools have a plan for orderly evacuation when necessary. Computers have built-in plans when they malfunction or crash. You are to hit the refresh button or restart the computer altogether. The world is full of plans for any kind of problem that might arise, and in our modern age, instructions are posted all over the place. When the nuclear race was at its height, maybe it is at its height again, there were evacuation plans posted everywhere. Shelters are designated, and people who didn't trust these plans built bomb shelters, many in their own homes. During the London Blitz, subway tunnels were used, saving thousands from sure destruction. All well and good. But what if the plan doesn't work? What if the threat is greater than the plan can handle? Tragically, we see this scenario more often than not. What happened at Pearl Harbor? The United States military plan failed miserably. September 11, 2001 came along, and that plan failed too. In fact, there was no real plan then. More recently, Hurricane Katrina ripped through New Orleans, and all plans failed again. Schools have plans for disasters and shootings, but Columbine and subsequent brutal shootings have shown their plans to be inadequate, if not archaic. Plan failure is a recurring human theme throughout history. Why is that? Why can't man anticipate the ultimate tragedy? Is it because he doesn't want to think about such horribleness? I expect that's part of it. Is it because man considers himself sort of invincible? Also partly true. What's the real answer? Well, let's take a look back at our hero Dave the hiker. I'm sure Dave thought of things that might befall him on his adventure. I'm sure he devised a plan for most all of them. Storms, lack of food, injury, cold weather being the most likely. But out of the blue, Dave was confronted with a far more challenging threat than any he could have imagined. Mountain lions are considered to not exist in the eastern United States save for a smaller version in Florida. Now here he was, his dog soon to be dead, and what did he do? First he froze. I dare say we all would. He also prayed. I think 100% of us would pray to our God or some deity. I also say 99% of us would have slowly backed away to hopefully save our own skin. I think all would agree that that would be the appropriate plan of action. But Dave was cut from a little different cloth than most. He knew he was out of options, but instead of giving up, he began to look around. He began to assess the situation. He began to realize he did not want to lose his best friend, his Rex. His first thought was then to charge the animal and let the chips fall. He and the lion were both about 200 pounds, and maybe he and Rex could win the fight, maybe not. But Dave began to look at more options, and then he saw the rocks. Then he realized he had a pretty good arm. Maybe not major league, but maybe good enough this day. He knew he must try it, and so he picked up the stones. History tells us about another Dave. This guy's name was David, son of Jesse from Bethlehem, Israel. It tells us that this David was a common shepherd who tended his father's sheep. At the time, Israel was ruled by its first king, Saul. Saul and Israel always seemed to be at war. The reason was that about 400 years earlier, Israel had exited Egypt, marched into Canaan, and taken the entire country by force. Well, this did not sit well with the locals nor the surrounding countries, so Saul was always involved in military battles trying to preserve his country. During one of these campaigns, King Saul bit off a little more than he could chew. He led his army against the Philistines, a race of giants who lived along the Mediterranean coast. 3 of David's brothers were soldiers in that army, and the two forces took positions on either side of the valley of Elah. Neither could make any headway, and the two armies seemed to be at an impasse. The stalemate dragged on until one day the Philistines sent an envoy with a proposition to end the battle. They proposed that their champion, the giant Goliath, fight the Israelite champion Mano el Mano. The winner would claim victory for his army, and the loser's army would have to withdraw. To this Israel agreed, but immediately King Saul had second thoughts. He had no champion. Saul was 6 feet 6 inches tall, but no match for a 10-foot giant. Besides, he was getting up there in years. He began looking around. There was his son Jonathan. There were Jesse's sons. There were his generals, his cavalry, his foot soldiers. But surely all would lose. Besides, no one wanted to go. He was about to withdraw from the challenge and withdraw from the battle. Along came little David, who was by now Saul's court musician. David piped up when he heard about the challenge and said, "I'll go." "Ha! You?" Saul laughed so hard he nearly split his side. "You aren't even a soldier. You're a harpist. Go back and play." "No, play me a tune now. I need refreshing," Saul said. "No, I can do it. I can take him down," David said, his voice full of confidence. "You couldn't even kill this fly on my arm," Saul said mockingly. "What makes you think—" "Sir, I killed a lion once. I did," David said boldly. "No," Saul said mockingly. "I suppose you did it with your bare hands, too." "That's right, sir. How'd you know?" "A lion, one of those big Asian ones, stole one of my dad's lambs. I chased after him, grabbed him by the mane, and snapped his neck." "Baloney," Saul said. "I got the scars to prove it." David lifted his shirt and revealed a couple of long, deep scars on his back. Saul was impressed, but just then one of David's brothers came by. "That was when our daddy beat you, lion. Ha! Did anyone see you kill that lion?" "No, but nothing." "I'll tell you what," Saul said. "I'll let you go out and try it. I hate to lose my court musician, but maybe the ogre will have mercy, and we can end this standoff and both withdraw. He'll probably laugh at you so much you'll cry, then we can all live to fight another day." And the rest, as they say again, is history. 1 Samuel chapter 17 details the story in marvelous fashion. Like our hero David also had a plan, but when things didn't work out as he expected, what did he do? He didn't rush ahead, he didn't shy away, he hit the refresh button. He took some time to reassess the situation. Then when he found the proper option, he took it and gave it all he had. King David knew what he could do with a sling, as Dave knew what he could do with a baseball. King David also knew he might fail, but he knew he had a reasonable chance, as did Dave. Our hero Dave was also as determined not to lose his best friend, his dog Rex, without a fight. The Bible story doesn't intimate this, but I'm sure King David knew that if he lost his fight, he would likely lose his friends, his brothers, his sheep, his king, and his country. King David is a fascinating character. The more you read of him, the more you appreciate the type of man he was. It became obvious why Christ refers repeatedly to himself as the Son of David, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Adversity and challenge after challenge followed David his entire life. From the lion to Goliath to Saul to Bathsheba to Absalom, we would call his life a mess. Yet he was able to meet every challenge, overcome every challenge, and then write about every challenge in a way unmatched in history. He penned 150 psalms detailing his life and trials and his plan. In Psalms 22:21, he refers to the lion. In his most memorable psalm, the 23rd one, he captures the essence of his plan and what everyone's plan should be. It constitutes just 5 words. The Lord is my shepherd.